Welcome to Build Your Maverick Business, the podcast for underdog, outlier, and renegade entrepreneurs. Brought to you by Strange Creative Studio. If you dream of going off on your own and launching your rebel empire, but don't know where to start, you're in the right place. We'll teach you how to use mindset, branding, and practical advice to build a killer business and transform your world. And now, here's your host, founder of Strange, Alex Pitt.
All right, you lot, welcome back. I tried to start this morning's podcast, having not actually spoken to anyone yet today. So I started recording and kind of honked like a goose into the microphone. And I had to stop, do a little cough, do a little do-re-mi, and a chug of water. And here we are trying again. So actually, funnily enough, that's a great segue into this week's episode because we're talking about tone of voice. Now, of course, a great example just dropped into my lap this week to illustrate my point because that tends to happen. Can't explain it, but I do love it. So recently, Strange took on a client that I wouldn't say is our usual bag. Okay, now this isn't something that I like to do. I don't like to work with clients who aren't our usual personas, who aren't fitting in with the kind of thing that we do. The reason being, I've done a lot of years working with clients that aren't a great fit for us, and I do avoid them normally. However, this was an exception. Okay, the reason we took on this client, don't get me wrong, by the way, they're absolutely lovely, just not our cup of tea. But the reason we took them on is that a friend of mine who usually works with them found himself being asked to do something he didn't have the experience to do, or he didn't have the skill set to take on this project. So he asked me if anyone at our studio could take it on instead. Fortunately, we did have somebody in-house. It wasn't me that was doing the actual work, but it did mean that I had to correspond with this client. Now, when I say that this wasn't our usual client, what I actually mean is that I found them very, very corporate. Again, absolutely lovely, but very M&S suit wearing industrial estate in Maidenhead kind of thing. You know what I mean, especially if you're in the UK, I think you know what I mean. So something very odd happened to me during this correspondence as we were sending these emails back and forth. The weird thing that happened was that I found myself morphing into a version of myself that was once very used to that world. Now, I don't think I've ever actually mentioned before, but I used to be a shipping manager for a fashion brand, which still makes me laugh to this day, as I am one of the most logistically inept people going. I can get lost on my way back from Morrison's. But I did, back in the day, used to visit these kinds of corporate sites, and I dallied in the corporate world. I didn't care for it much, and that's why I'm here talking to you lovely people. But just for context, I do have some experience in this. So these emails that I found myself sending suddenly felt very out of character for me. I was giving it the kind regards. I hope this email finds you well. Do let me know if there is anything more I can help you with. Now notice how when I read that back, I can only mock myself by reading it in the voice of a Radio 4 news lady. Don't get me wrong, I'm not usually starting emails with, all right, mate, or ending them with, peace out, dickhead. But there is so much more warmth to my tone usually. A bit of cheeky humour sometimes. You've heard this before, surely. Now, the last email I sent before sitting to record this podcast to a different client and more of the Strange audience, I managed to sneak in the word shenanigans. The last post we put out on LinkedIn had the sentence, armed with only a slingshot and a can-do attitude, he yeeted a rock at the giant's head and knocked him out cold. Do go and read that one, it is a good one. David and Goliath branding. Thanks very much. Shameless plug. But it's that old phrase, right? It's not what you said, it's the way you said it. Your tone of voice is doing the job of how you say something rather than what you're saying. Now, obviously, so far in this episode, I've been talking about my personal tone of voice. But when it comes to your brand voice, choosing the right kind of language is so important for making sure that you're giving off the right impression. Now that means paying close attention to the connotations that certain words have and the vibe that you're giving off by using certain language. So while you may already know what you want to say, there is a bit of an art to making sure that you use the right tone. So take these two examples, right, of a simple statement that a business might make about their customer service. So option 1, our staff are here to provide excellent customer service at all times. Versus option 2, our team are here to give you a helping hand every single day. Now, those two sentences are essentially saying the same thing, but the tone is very different. Look at the choice of words here. Staff versus team. Providing excellent customer service versus giving you a helping hand. The impression that we get is that option 1 is more formal, more corporate, and they are very serious players. Maybe an insurance broker, a solicitor. Option 2 is warmer, friendlier, and more casual. Now, personally, I'm drawn a lot more to the second option because I like warm and friendly. That's me. However, the average John Smith, who wears the M&S suit and works in the industrial estate in Maidenhead, may find that tone unprofessional and overly familiar. Now, therein lies a very important distinction between the two options, and there's a reason that this episode comes in after the bit about personas. Knowing who you're speaking to is so important when crafting your tone of voice. Some people are going to be more aligned and respond better to certain language than others. So getting into the minds of your audience is an essential step, so you know how you're speaking to them. Now, let me give you another example, okay? I could use this statement to describe what Strange does. We are a creative agency who focus on genuine brand design for disruptive businesses. Instead, what I actually say is, Strange are a bunch of misfits that see past the obvious into what makes your brand extraordinary. Now, your average John Smith is going to fucking hate that. But I don't want to work with John Smith, do I? The Strange tone of voice uses words like mavericks, underdogs, renegades to describe our audience, and all of our other words that we use, all of the other phrases, are a bit rough around the edges. Instead of working with disruptive, air quotes, businesses, our clients break the mold. Instead of audience, we talk about our cult. All of the phrases we use are leaning into that rebellious streak of the people that we want to reach. Remember, we are that outlaw archetype. By using those kinds of words and phrases, we're speaking those people's language, and they feel like we're talking to them and to them alone. Now, forgive me if I cannot remember whether or not I have mentioned this quote on this podcast before. I'm going to say it again if I have. It's one of my favourites, from the absolute legend that is Maya Angelou. Now, she said, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So how do you want your audience to feel at the sound of your words? Is it inspired, fired up, soothed, nurtured, challenged, amused? Whatever it is, put every word you say through that filter and make those genuine connections. All right, you lot, that's it for this week. I will be back with you next week for the last in this series. Have a good one. I'll catch you here next time.
Got an idea for a maverick business of your own? Learn how to build a powerful brand that will get people obsessed with our online program, not just a pretty logo. You'll learn a simple step-by-step framework that will kickstart your killer brand and help you find your raving fan base. Find out more today at strangecreativestudio.com.